Well, let's get through what was a mammoth night for earnings in the United States. All about the tech titans, of course. Google shares up in after hours as its parent company Alphabet saw quarterly profit and revenue hit a record high, blowing past analyst estimates on the back of a surge in ad spend. As consumers flock to online shopping, don't we know it? Total Google ad revenue rose nearly 70% to $50.4 billion. Remember, this is quarterly. YouTube revenue up nearly 84% to $7 billion. Apple also beating the street with third quarter iPhone sales jumping nearly 50% on a year earlier. Still, no guidance provided going forward, marking the sixth quarter in a row. It's also reporting strength in Greater China, with sales up 58%. CEO Tim Cook says the success of the quarter wasn't just because users were upgrading old iPhones, but said even Android customers were getting on board buying their first iPhone. Of course, global supply shortage is being flagged as a potential constraint going forward. And Microsoft a beat on the top and bottom lines as demand soared for its cloud-based services, more people working and learning remotely. Shares, though, took a hit on weaker Surface and Windows revenue amid the global chip shortage. And UBS shares falling to three-month lows after its domestic revenue from U.S. packages, that's interesting, missed estimates. The company did, though, beat on top and bottom lines on strength in e-commerce orders, and Visa saw quarterly profits rising with COVID-19 vaccinations fueling demand. GE warning inflationary pressures are set to intensify, particularly at its jet engine business. Here's an interesting chart on screen for you, coming to us via the Daily Shot. It's Goldman Sachs research, though. Get this, 179 days have passed since the last 5% S&P 500 drawdown. This is as of the 22nd of July. Let's get back to some of those big tech results overnight. Lachlan Hughes is joining us from Swell Asset Management via Skype. Welcome to the program. Nice to have you there. So it is all systems go for these tech giants. Massive revenue coming in. I mean, eye-watering numbers if you think about it for a quarter. So what stood out to you the most if you look at them as a group?
Yeah, look, I think the key takeaway for me is that the digital businesses were resilient during the acute phase of COVID, and now as the economies reopen, they're continuing to perform.
So they're continuing to perform as the reopening continues. Does that indicate, if we look further out, that they continue to perform at the level they are?
Well, I think it's each company has its own unique drivers, and I would say, and you mentioned Apple earlier, but I think the iPhone upgrade cycle is driving a multi-year revenue growth for Apple, and as you pointed out, people switching from Android as well, so they're doing very well. Now, on top of that, once you have iPhone sales, that leads to increases in sales in both the wearables and the services business. And then looking further afield for Apple, they've still got investments they're currently making in transportation and health, and they look like large markets which can drive this stock higher over the long term.
Okay, so if you are looking at big tech and you're not already invested, do you look at those big headline names, the FANGs Plus, which we still have to hear from Amazon or Facebook, or is it wise to play this another way? Are there other sort of companies that perhaps have access to software, to cloud, to data? I mean, is it still time to get into these big US tech names?
I think it is, yeah. So if you look at a business like Alphabet or Microsoft, they have multi-year drivers that are going to push this stock higher over time, and their earnings as well. And cloud's an interesting one. So that's benefiting both Alphabet and Microsoft. And at the moment, we spend about 5% of our GDP on technology, and we see that moving to 10% by 2030. So despite the fact that it's, this cloud shift has been happening for some time, it still has an enormous runway in front of it. So I would say for your viewers, any of those names would serve you well in a high quality portfolio.
If you were looking to get into those names, though, is it wise for people not already in to potentially gain access or exposure via an ETF, a big tech ETF?
Oh, look, I'm an active manager. We try and find the best businesses, and we take a concentrated approach. I still think that's the way to invest. I mean, it is good to have a broad selection of companies, but our philosophy and belief is if you find a wonderful business, you should have a meaningful investment on that business. And a business like Alphabet for your viewers, look, it's going to do really well. It's this advertising, the shift from traditional advertising to digital advertising is still happening, and it will happen over the next 5 to 10 years. So we feel like that is a business that's going to continue to drive earnings higher. And then, as we mentioned before, the cloud, that's also a one that can continue to drive Alphabet. It's interesting because you look at these companies, you think, gosh, they've been around for a long time, everybody's heard of them. But I think when you do the hard work on these businesses, you really start to see companies which have a wonderful future. And we see it in each of these companies.
Got it. Thank you so much for joining us, Lachlan. Really appreciate your insights. It's still more to come. I know it's a busy time. So Amazon and Facebook up next.
Thanks for your time.